Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to a fire lookout near Mission Hill in the Marquette National Forest of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. The climate here is a humid continental climate with long, cold, snowy winters, which can accumulate 100 inches of snow. The summers are warm and humid with frequent rain and storms. With an abundance of water, the plant life here thrives. Dense forests of paper birch, red maple, and northern white cedar tower over bushes of serviceberry, dogwood, and numerous other berry species. The rolling terrain varies between 600 feet and 1,000 feet in elevation, with marshy bogs in the lower areas, and ridges of thick forests between. White-tailed deer thrive in this habitat, and are hunted by coyotes, bobcats, gray wolves, and black bears, maintaining a balance that goes back eons. On July 7, 1948, 3-year-old Carol Ann Pomranke was playing by herself on the back porch of the cabin her family called home. Her father, Arthur, was a fire lookout attendee, often helping out as a park ranger. He had left earlier in the morning to help out at a nearby ranger station called Rayco, while Miss Pomranke took care of the kids and the home. Miss Pomranke had a friend of hers, Mrs. Summers, come over to visit while the kids played. 5-year-old Alan Pomranke played by himself in the basement, while Mrs. Summers and Mrs. Pomranke sipped coffee and chatted as they ironed clothes in the kitchen above. Carol Ann had been entertaining herself for over an hour when Mrs. Pomranke heard her scream out. Running to the screen door, Mrs. Pomranke could see Carol Ann on all fours, with one of her hands placed on the screen door. As Mrs. Pomranke approached the screen door and glanced up, she saw a small-sized black bear about halfway up the porch steps. The bear let out a low, rumbling growl and pursed its lips, revealing its teeth. With Mrs. Pomranke paralyzed by the sudden appearance of the bear, the predator leapt forward and bit onto Carol Ann's neck, just below her skull. Dragging her from the porch, the bear repositioned its jaws on the little girl, biting her by the arm to drag her further away. Once the bear had dragged the little girl for a short distance, it picked her up in its arms and walked into the forest on its hind legs. Mrs. Summers quickly pulled Mrs. Pomranke inside the cabin and slammed the door to ensure the bear didn't attack either of them. Mrs. Pomranke immediately called up the Rayco Ranger Station, where Arthur was working. After listening to the details of his daughter's attack, Arthur notified other ranger stations to recruit help in finding his daughter and the bear that had just killed her. Over 100 volunteers converged on the Pomranke cabin just after Alex Van Leuven, a professional trapper, arrived with his hunting dogs. Met by Rangers Bruce Elliott and Pomranke, along with the fisherman Wayne Weston, Van Leuven immediately began tracking the bear's scent with his dogs. Weston and Elliott accompanied Van Leuven as Mr. Pomranke comforted his forlorn wife. The hunting party didn't go far before locating one of Carol Ann's shoes. Following the dogs past her shoe, the bear tracks entered a dense patch of the forest. Along a stream, about a quarter-mile from the cabin, Carol Ann's lifeless body was discovered. Knowing that the bear may return to the little girl's corpse, Weston volunteered to stand watch over it as Van Leuven and his dogs continued tracking the bear. Given the dogs barked as they pursued the bear, it had plenty of time to leave before the men arrived at the little girl's corpse. While being pursued by the dogs, the bear ran in a large circle to return to Carol Ann's corpse. As Weston sat watch, the bear emerged from the brush at a distance of only 30 yards. Using his .30-30 hunting rifle, Weston fired a fatal shot that ended the terror the bear had wrought on the Pomranke family. After recovering Carol Ann's remains, an autopsy was completed. The coroner indicated that she instantly died when the bear's canines pierced the base of her skull just as the attack began. The carcass of the bear was also examined. It was found to be a scrawny 1.5-year-old weighing only 150 pounds. Despite abundant berries and clover being available this year, the bear had not been consuming typical foods from the area. The attack on Carol Ann was labeled as a predatory attack. She hadn't taken the bear by surprise, and the bear was not defending cubs. Speaking of Cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. Michigan's black bear population has experienced significant growth in recent years. As of 2022, the state is home to over 12,000 black bears, with more than 10,000 residing in the Upper Peninsula. Geographically, Michigan encompasses approximately 96,716 square miles, indicating a bear density of 1 bear per 8 square miles, including urban areas and bodies of water. The increase in the black bear population, particularly in the northern lower peninsula and in the upper peninsula, has led to a rise in human-bear interactions. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources continues to monitor these trends to manage and maintain a healthy balance between wildlife populations and human activities and safety. After reviewing the facts surrounding this sad episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Why do you think the bear carried Carol Ann away in its arms and walking on its hind legs? Why wasn't the bear eating the clover and berries so abundant in the area? What could have led the bear to the Pomeranke's back porch and Carol Ann's location? Did Mrs. Pomeranke know Carol Ann was dead before the bear dragged her from the porch? This is the only thing that makes sense to me as to why she didn't follow the bear to get her daughter back. I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Taylor County in northern Wisconsin to the town of Medford. With only 20,633 people in all of Taylor County and 4,285 people in Medford, this area is vintage, small-town America. To the south of the town, farmland sprawls and produces snap peas, potatoes, carrots, and sweet corn. On the plentiful orchards around the area, the top products are cherries, apples, nuts, and cranberries. The state of Wisconsin is one of the top states for producing dairy products and boasts over 600 different cheeses. Just about 5 miles north of Medford, the surrounding area is host to the Mondo Hardwood State Natural Area, a sort of state park set apart for the preservation of natural ecologies. To the west of that is the Kidrick State Swamp Natural Area, a mix of swampy woods, ponds, lakes, and streams. A diverse set of wildlife species call this area home and include white-tailed deer, coyotes, foxes, cougar, elk, and even wolves. This area is just about as wild as it gets. Just north of Medford, a family is settling in for the night. To protect the anonymity of the family, we will be calling the couple Dave and Deborah. The children were put to bed for the evening, and Dave and Deborah were beginning to unwind from the day. They enjoyed watching the birds eat from their bird feeder in the backyard, but this evening they could hear something unusual back there. As they peered into the darkness, they flipped the back porch light on and see the eyeshine of 4 eyes glowing back at them. It takes their eyes a moment to adapt to the darkness, but within a few seconds they can make out the shape of a large bear and a small bear. They are looking at a sow black bear and her cub raiding their bird feeder. Dave and Deborah aren't too concerned at the sight, but they paid good money for those bird feeders and didn't want them damaged. Dave begins to yell through the open window at the bears. He tells them to go away and get out of here. As soon as he begins yelling, the sow's head quickly turns toward him. His voice alarms her as she was unaware of any human presence. Her cub immediately runs for the bushes nearby, and the sow charges toward Dave's voice coming from the window. It's hard to make out what's going on as he looks through the window in the darkness, but Dave thinks he can make out the shape of a bear moving quickly toward him, and he can hear the grunting and growling as she comes. Suddenly he sees the dark figure emerge into the window frame from which he's yelling. Before he could even process what's going on, the bear is coming through the window after him. Dave is completely terrified as the large bear is now inside of his home and biting and clawing at him. Dave is yelling and trying to fight back when Deborah begins yelling and trying to run the bear off and back out of their house. Dave grabs a kitchen knife and tries to stab the bear in a vital area. He gets in a few good jabs, but the bear continues her attack and is now biting and clawing at Deborah. Dave is now becoming more desperate as he runs through the house to get his gun. As he grabs it and runs back toward the bear, which is now entering the hallway leading to their children's bedroom, Dave takes careful aim and dispatches the Bruin before it can get any further down the hallway. Dave and Deborah have numerous bites and claw marks on their bodies and call authorities to the scene for assistance. Both of them fought valiantly and suffered moderate injuries, which were treated at the hospital. The exact number of bites on their bodies was not released, but is reported to be several. The Taylor County Sheriff's Office responds to the call for help and documents the occurrence. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources takes possession of the bear's carcass for analysis. Bear attacks in Wisconsin are rare, but a home invasion from a black bear is nearly non-existent. In 1989, Wisconsin was reported to have 9,000 black bears, but today that number exceeds 24,000 black bears. As forest and habitat are developed, that increases pressure on the bears, especially sows with cubs, to find resources for survival. The state of Wisconsin does have a bear hunting season, which is a little over a month long and runs from mid-September to mid-October most years. Most hunting zones have a quota system to help stabilize populations, but as bears are pushed into areas occupied by people and out of ideal habitat through competition, bear populations will have to be decreased to avoid further conflict.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the remote woods of Siren, Wisconsin. Siren, located in Burnett County, is a small rural community surrounded by dense forests and lakes. This region is part of the Western Coulees and Ridges ecological landscape, known for rolling hills, river valleys, and forests. The area's topography was shaped by glacial activity, resulting in forests, wetlands, and prairies, alongside rivers and streams, making it a prime location for outdoor activities like hiking, fishing, and hunting. The vegetation around Siren includes oak hickory and maple basswood forests, as well as wetland species such as cattails and swamp white oaks. The area's wildlife is diverse, with species like white-tailed deer, wolves, black bears, and other animals thriving in the woods. On September 6, 2024, 43-year-old Ryan Bierman was enjoying a bear hunting trip with Owen, his 12-year-old son. Ryan was an experienced outdoorsman and father of two living in River Falls, Wisconsin. On this particular hunting trip, he was joined by his son Owen, who had already developed a passion for hunting. With a bear hunting permit in hand, Owen hoped to harvest a bear for the first time. The two set out together, armed with a handgun and Owen's hunting rifle, excited for a father-son outing. The Biermans had set out a bear bait station, which is legal in select states, including Wisconsin, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Minnesota, Michigan, Oklahoma, Arkansas, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Maine, and Alaska, with the remaining 38 states having banned it, according to the Humane Society website. Following the required guidelines for establishing a bear bait station, they regularly stock it with bait to bring in bears and likely surveil the bears approaching the bait station with automatic game cameras. This allows hunters to determine the size and traits of bears feeding at the bait stations. The Biermans owned a family cabin just outside of Siren, where they'd set up their bait station. Observing from an elevated tree stand, the Biermans would spend the majority of the day waiting for bears to come into the bait station. About 6 p.m., Owen spotted a bear slipping through the shadows of the forest toward the bait. This was the moment he was waiting for, and he drew down on the bear's vital area with his rifle, waiting for the optimal moment to dispatch it. He slowly squeezed the trigger, and the report of the rifle roared as it kicked against his shoulder. Being an inexperienced bear hunter, Owen had mistakenly shot the bear in a place that was not immediately fatal to the animal. He peered over the rifle as the bear disappeared into the forest, hoping to watch it tumble in its death throes. Ryan and Owen were overjoyed with the thought of a successful harvest of the bear. They knew better than dashing into the forest after the bear, and waited 20 minutes before taking up the blood trail. At that point, they implemented the second phase of their plan to harvest a bear. They brought out the neighbor's dog to help them track the bear, and it picked up the blood trail quickly. As they navigated their way through the forest, the Biermans became encumbered in a thick patch of bushes. They worked their way through it, with Ryan emerging before his son into a small clearing. Just as they emerged, the neighbor's dog yelped from the brush on the far side and dashed past them in a hasty retreat. Seeing the dark shape of the bear in the brush, Ryan muttered, "There he is, Owen." Immediately after that, the angry and wounded bear emerged only 6 feet from the hunters and closed in on them with blinding speed. Now Ryan wasn't ill-prepared for a close-range encounter with the bear, as he held his sidearm in his hand as the bear closed in on him. Firing 8 shots as quickly as he could, Ryan hoped to stop the bear in its tracks, but missed each shot. The next thing Ryan was aware of, he was on his back and could only see the bear's teeth and claws. He pulled his right arm up over his head to block the bear's bite and heard the crunch of his bones as it closed its mouth on his arm. Still holding his pistol, Ryan pistol-whipped the bear about the head. Aiming for the area between the bear's ear and jaw, he hoped to knock it unconscious, if not kill it, but it was like hitting a brick wall. From Ryan's perspective, the bear was a tornado of slashing claws and snapping jaws. It bit him all over his body so quickly that the only way he knew the bear's location was by the pain from its bites and strikes. Kicking at the bear, Ryan felt its teeth punch into the flesh of his leg and then begin to rip into his abdomen. After biting and tearing at his stomach, the bear turned its attack to his head and latched onto his cheek. As the bear ripped a ribbon of flesh from his face, Ryan's eyes turned and registered a flash from the muzzle of Owen's rifle. Thinking the end was very near, Ryan suddenly felt the bear go limp as it collapsed on top of him. Now realizing the worst was over, Ryan struggled to push the bear's mass from atop himself. Blood seeped from deep gashes and bites on his arm, legs, abdomen, and face, but he was alive, and his son had saved his life. Realizing that Ryan would need immediate medical help, Owen helped his father locate his eyeglasses. He guided his father out of the woods and back to their cabin. Once the hunters arrived, neighbors converged to provide first aid while they loaded him aboard a vehicle. They immediately drove toward the Grantsburg emergency room when they ran into the ambulance part way to their goal. The medics on the ambulance put Ryan on a litter and loaded him aboard to ferry him the rest of the way to the hospital. While at the hospital, Ryan received 23 stitches to reattach the flap of skin on his cheek, as well as having his gashes and puncture wounds cleaned and sutured. From his hospital bed, Ryan called his wife on his cell phone. Upon hearing the details of the attack, she initially didn't believe what he told her, thinking it was some kind of yarn. Ryan indicates that the facts of his attack are indisputable because he has the scars to prove it. After all the medical stuff was taken care of, Ryan and Owen were allowed to claim the bear's carcass. They're considering how they're going to have it mounted as a keepsake to commemorate their bear hunt and the amazing story behind it. Ryan indicates that he's already planning their next bear hunt, and nothing will keep him from doing what he enjoys with his son. Regarding the bear's motives for its attack, it was defending itself from the hunters. Although it was approaching a food source, it didn't attack Ryan out of defense of its food. There is no source indicating that cubs were present at any point in the confrontation. Speaking of Cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. The state of Wisconsin is reportedly home to 24,000 black bears, over its 65,000 square miles. This is a black bear density of 1 black bear for every 2.7 square miles, including urban areas. From 2013 to 2022, there were 9 recorded bear attacks in the state. There has never been a fatal bear attack in the state of Wisconsin. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Should hunters carry more powerful firearms when they're hunting or tracking dangerous game? What role does calmness under pressure play in life or death situations, like Owen's rescue of his father? How can hunting practices be improved to reduce the chances of dangerous encounters like this one? This incredible story of survival reminds us of the importance of preparation and quick thinking in the wilderness. Thanks to Owen's bravery and calm response, both he and his father walked away from what could have been a fatal encounter. I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the forests of Sheboygan, Michigan in the 1880s. This is the tragic story of Franklin Devereaux, a logger and Civil War veteran whose encounter with a bear ended in a fatal struggle. While bear attacks in Michigan are rare, Franklin's story is a sobering reminder of the dangers faced by pioneers carving a life out of the wilderness. In the late 19th century, Michigan's northern forests were a vast expanse of towering hardwoods and conifers, teeming with wildlife. These woodlands were vital to the state's booming timber industry, drawing workers like Franklin Devereux deep into the wilderness. The region around Sheboygan was known for its rugged terrain, dense tree cover, and abundant wildlife, including white-tailed deer, black bears, foxes, and wolves. Settlers and loggers frequently encountered wild animals while harvesting timber or hunting game. While black bears are the only species of bear native to Michigan, aggressive encounters were rare unless the bears felt threatened or were guarding food. On September 4, 1883, 52-year-old Franklin Devereux set out into the forest near Sheboygan, as he often did. He was hunting for deer while he gathered huckleberries. Despite his experience, Franklin could not have anticipated the life-or-death battle that awaited him. Born in 1842, Franklin Devereux was a Civil War veteran who served in the 25th Michigan Infantry. After the war, he returned to Michigan to work as a hunter and trapper, but mostly hid out by himself as a hermit. By the 1880s, Franklin was an experienced woodsman, familiar with the dangers of the wilderness and the tools of survival. Now, given the time frame, it is time we address what kind of weapon Franklin was carrying with him. His muzzle-loading rifle required him to pour gunpowder down the barrel and pack it with a ramrod. Next, he placed a slugger ball on a piece of wadding made of paper and pressed it down into the barrel ahead of the gunpowder with the ramrod. The rifle is loaded at that point, but the process required the placement of a percussion cap on the nipple and cocking the weapon before pulling the trigger to fire the weapon. This process could take a well-trained woodsman about 15 to 20 seconds in total, and about the same between firing shots. As Franklin worked over a big stand of berries, he plucked them and put them in a sack he was carrying. The patch was expansive and would likely provide all the berries he could carry, but he only needed enough for the next few days. Carefully examining each berry for ripeness, Franklin slowly worked his way through different areas of the berry patch. Ahead of him, about 30 yards, a large black bear suddenly caught his eye. The bear was looking away from him as it ate berries out of the same patch. Knowing this big old bear would provide a lot of meat, a great hide, and an ample supply of delicious bear fat, Franklin carefully aimed his rifle. Just as he squeezed the trigger, Franklin's rifle roared, and a large cloud of smoke obscured the bear. Now, muzzleloaders in the 1880s had a few significant flaws compared to modern-day hunting rifles. First of all, each load of powder could vary significantly, which affected the amount of power the gun could deliver. The rifling in old-time muzzleloaders wasn't all that great either, which could leave the ball or bullet drifting unpredictably. This meant that each time Franklin fired his muzzleloader, he would have to be closer than 100 yards to the target to be accurate. As you may imagine, Franklin's shot didn't hit the bear where he was hoping. It struck the bear in the flank, which is behind the ribs, and not an immediately lethal wound. The enraged Bruin spun on its heels and dashed toward Franklin as the mountain man pulled the ramrod from his muzzleloader to prepare for another shot. A few days later, Native American Sam Flynn was making his way through the same berry patch. As he entered a small clearing, he could see the duff, all torn up and scattered. It looked like a considerable fight had occurred here, and Sam paused to look around. A few yards away, Sam saw a man sitting on a log with his head resting in his hands. The man was still and didn't respond when Sam hollered out a greeting. Approaching the man, Sam could see the man's left side, cheek, and legs had been chewed to the bone, and one of his shoulders was out of socket. The man's eye was gouged out, and his gut was torn open. Claw wounds covered his body from head to toe. As Sam touched his shoulder, the dead man tipped over and revealed the injury that had likely killed him. The dead man was Franklin, and in addition to his other wounds, his skull was crushed. Unsure of what had caused Franklin's injuries, Sam glanced over a few yards to the top of a small rise. A large black bear lay motionless on the rise, so Sam headed over to check it out. As Sam looked the bear over, he could see the wound to the bear's flank and a large wound to the bear's jaws. Putting the details together, Sam reasoned that the bear and the mountain man had a duel to the death in the berry patch, and both came out on the short end of the stick. It was clear the bear had attacked out of self-defense. It wasn't defending a cached animal carcass or cubs. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. Franklin's body was buried on the banks of the lake now bearing his name, Devereaux Lake, just outside of Sheboygan. Franklin's grave has since become a point of local interest, marking the site of one of Michigan's most infamous wildlife encounters. The state of Michigan currently hosts an estimated population of 12,000 black bears, primarily in the northern half of the state. Black bears in Michigan can vary in size from 150 pounds to 400 pounds for females, and males tipping the scale at 500 pounds on occasion. In the 1880s, Michigan's bear population was likely more widespread due to the lack of urban development and deforestation. This increased the likelihood of human-bear encounters, particularly for individuals like Franklin, who spent extended periods in remote areas. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Did Franklin's life as a hermit lend him to the added risk of bear attacks? Have you ever eaten bear meat or fat? Does living off the land sound appealing to you after hearing Franklin's tale? I think I'll rely on the grocery store for my food. I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comment section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's story takes us to the beautiful but wild forests of Trempealeau County, Wisconsin. This area is known for its dense woodlands, rolling hills, and abundant wildlife. The region's forests are dominated by oak, maple, and pine trees, with an understory rich in dogwood shrubs, hazelnut bushes, and wild raspberry plants. These woodlands provide a perfect habitat for a variety of wildlife, including white-tailed deer, coyotes, wild turkeys, and dangerous black bears. The climate here features cold winters and warm, humid summers, making it an ideal setting for a wide range of plant and animal life. It's in this environment that Dalton Roach, an avid outdoorsman and professional baseball player, faced a harrowing and nearly deadly encounter with one of nature's most powerful predators. Dalton, a 25-year-old from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, was no stranger to adventure. When he wasn't playing professional baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals AA affiliate in Springfield, Missouri, Roach could often be found outdoors, hunting deer, or enjoying the natural beauty of his home state. In the fall of October 2021, Roach was eager to take part in another hunting trip, setting out into the woods of Trempealeau County for what he believed would be a routine deer hunt. Little did he know that this outing would turn into an encounter he would never forget. With his bow in hand, Roach climbed into the tree stand, located about 20 feet above the ground, waiting patiently for the time to pass and deer 30 to arrive. The thick forest canopy around him was quiet and serene. Roach had been deer hunting many times before, but this trip would be anything but routine and enjoyable for the young sportsman. As the day progressed, Roach noticed a dark shadow filtering through the forest approaching him. Much to his surprise and excitement, a black bear, estimated to weigh 250 to 300 pounds, appeared and began wandering through the woods, seemingly unaware of Roach's presence. The bear moved slowly, seemingly at ease, as it explored the forest floor, probably searching for acorns. Roach, fascinated by the bear, decided to take out his cell phone and record the spectacle. After all, seeing a black bear in the wild was a rare experience for him. The bear continued to meander through the woods, moving closer to the tree where Roach was perched. The bear showed no signs of aggression, and at first, Roach felt no immediate danger. However, that changed when the bear veered directly toward his tree stand. As the bear approached, Roach put his cell phone away, sensing that the situation was becoming more serious. He could hear the distinct sound of the bear's claws scratching the tree bark as it began climbing the tree. Roach craned his neck to see what it was up to, but couldn't get a good view of the bear. Before he could react, the bear was directly beneath him, scaling the tree with surprising speed. Roach remained still, hoping that the bear would climb back down, but to his shock the bear continued its ascent. Within moments, Roach could feel the bear's breath on his back. The bear reached the tree stand platform and placed a massive paw on Roach's lap and pressing into his thigh as it examined him from behind. Peering at the bear from the corner of his eye from only inches away, the hunter's brain was spinning as an overload of adrenaline poured into his bloodstream. He could see the bear dip its head and felt a jolt of pain flash through his body as the bear drove its teeth through the flesh in the middle of his back. At that moment, Roach's survival instincts kicked in. He knew he couldn't do anything other than bluff the bear at this point. Deciding to act, Roach turned around on the hunting stand and made himself appear as large as possible, raising his arms wide and shouting at the bear. Startled by Roach's sudden movement, the predator hesitated and leaned back, seemingly confused by the unexpected reaction. Roach continued to yell, trying to intimidate the bear, and to his immense relief, the bear began to climb back down the tree. However, the danger was far from over. After descending, the bear circled the base of the tree, watching Roach with an intense gaze. It seemed to be thinking of climbing up again, and then rethinking the option. Though it appeared the bear had retreated, Roach knew that black bears could be unpredictable, and the bear's lingering presence made him uneasy as blood trickled down his back from the gaping wounds. In a moment of quick thinking, Roach nocked an arrow, his only means of defense. With no bear spray or firearm at his disposal, he knew that his bow was his last line of protection, should the bear attack again. As the two stared each other down, Roach silently debated to himself if he should shoot the bear or wait to see if it leaves. He feared angering the bear might bring a renewed attack, so he waited for it to make another move toward him. Roach decided to call a friend for assistance, asking them to drive their truck as close as possible to his location, knowing that his best chance of escape was to avoid being in the woods after dark. After several tense minutes, the bear began to slowly meander back into the timber, disappearing from sight. Once he was sure the bear was gone, Roach climbed down from the tree and made his way back to his truck, grateful to have survived the encounter with only minor injuries. The bow hunter sought and received medical treatment, which included cleaning the puncture wounds and administering a tetanus shot, as well as preventative rabies injections to ensure that there were no complications from the attack. Despite the trauma, Roach remained optimistic, expressing relief that the encounter hadn't been more serious. "I'm pretty fortunate that it's not some big nasty bite that took off half of my back," Roach said afterward. He described the area around the bite as tender, but he knew that it could have been much worse. In Wisconsin, there are an estimated 24,000 black bears, and the state is divided into several hunting zones. Wisconsin's bear hunting season runs from September to October, with hunters using both dogs and bait in designated areas. While bear encounters are not uncommon in the state, attacks like Roach's remain rare, especially ones involving such close proximity. The bear attack was chalked up to the bear being curious more than anything else by authorities. It wasn't defending an obvious food cache, and no cubs were seen in the vicinity. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes, plus pictures, and the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. Wisconsin is home to one of the largest black bear populations in the United States, with bears primarily inhabiting the northern part of the state. The population of black bears is estimated to be around 24,000, and the state spans an area of approximately 65,000 square miles. This puts the bear density at roughly 1 bear per 3 square miles. In the last decade, there have been only a handful of recorded bear attacks in the state, with the majority of encounters being non-lethal. However, as human activity encroaches on bear habitats, and bear populations increase, the likelihood of such encounters increases. Dalton Roach's terrifying encounter with a black bear serves as a reminder that even experienced hunters can find themselves in life-threatening situations in the wilderness. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Could Dalton Roach's encounter have ended differently if he'd been carrying bear spray or a firearm? Would these tools have prevented the attack or made it safer for him to escape? What drove the bear to climb the tree and bite Roach? Was it curiosity, hunger, or simply an unusual behavioral response? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.